Dinosaurs from 250 million years ago can be brought back to life in Eyewitness Virtual Reality Dinosaur Hunter. Make your way to the Dinosaur excavation site immediately. Once there, it's your task to travel deep beneath the surface of the Earth to search for fossilized bones and to bring long-dead dinosaurs back to life. Go to the Dinosaur excavation site without delay.
This reconstruction of Earl Douglas's trip to Utah begins with his arrival at the dig site in 1908. Douglas and his team blasted the rock surface with dynamite to expose fossilized bones buried deep in the rock and painted a grid over the area they planned to excavate. Among the bones exposed were the spine and leg bone of a diplodocus. Large sections of rock embedded with fossils were levered away from the mountainside and transported to the Carnegie Museum, where they were unpacked and prepared for exhibiting. This skull of Diplodocus carnegie was named after the museum owner, Andrew Carnegie, who financed the trip. Like this egret catching fish, with a sudden movement of the head, Coelophysis might have snatched its prey and manoeuvred it between its narrow jaws before swallowing it head first. Or, when hunting along riverbanks like this bear, it might have grasped its victim in its clawed hands while it tore it apart with its powerful jaws and needle-sharp teeth. This flightless cassowary has a bony head crest that it uses to butt its way through the undergrowth, as Oviraptor may have done. Oviraptor possessed a toothless, beak-like jaw similar to that of the cassowary, but it had 3-fingered hands and a long muscular tail used for balance.
Oviraptor's narrow feet were designed for running at speed. The long metatarsals are typical of swift-footed dinosaurs. The first toe was short and placed high on the foot away from the ground. The remaining 3 weight-bearing toes were armed with sharp, curved claws.
DNA is the genetic blueprint that contains all the instructions needed to construct a living organism. Millions of years ago, biting insects sucked the blood of dinosaurs. Palm trees exude resin, and many insects get trapped in this sticky substance, which then hardens to form amber. If an insect were preserved after biting a dinosaur, the dinosaur's blood, containing DNA, would remain intact. Small fragments of DNA may also survive in bone. If DNA is extracted, it is unlikely that dinosaurs could be recreated. But analysis of the DNA would answer many questions about dinosaurs. After the bulk of overlying rock has been removed, the delicate work of scraping sandstone away from the dinosaur's bones begins. A special hardening liquid is poured over the fossilized bones to prevent them from crumbling. The dinosaur's bones are individually identified and their positions marked on a quarry map. Strips of material soaked in plaster are wrapped around the dinosaur's bones to protect them. The plaster-wrapped bones are strapped up, ready to be transported to the museum for cleaning and studying. Modern-day plant eaters chew plant food by moving their lower jaw in a circular grinding motion. However, dinosaurs were probably like reptiles of today, which can only clamp their jaws up and down. So how did they chew plant fibres? Some had an ingenious method of chewing. As their jaws closed, the upper teeth struck the lower teeth at an angle, sliding the upper jaw outwards in a grinding motion.
Brachiosaurus was an immense plant-eating dinosaur that used its long neck to reach food in the treetops, cropping vegetation with its small chisel-shaped teeth. Food swallowed by Brachiosaurus was pushed down the esophagus. The muscular walls of the esophagus squeezed the food downwards to the stomach. Inside the stomach, the unchewed vegetation was mixed with digesting chemicals called enzymes, released from the stomach wall. Stomach stones, called gastroliths, were swallowed by the dinosaur. These gastroliths ground together when the stomach muscles contracted, crushing tough vegetation into a digestible liquid paste. After preliminary digestion by enzymes in the stomach, the food passed into the small intestine, where it was digested further and absorbed into the bloodstream. Undigested material passed into the large intestine. Any remaining waste material was pushed out of the body through the cloaca.
Like the giraffe, Brachiosaurus probably roamed in small herds through low-lying forests. To drink, Brachiosaurus would have simply lowered its extraordinarily long neck towards the water. Like the giraffe, Brachiosaurus's forelimbs were much longer than its hind limbs, and its shoulders were raised above hip level. Brachiosaurus probably didn't have the advantage of the giraffe's long tongue to reach its food, so it may have swung its head from side to side, cropping the vegetation with its chisel-shaped teeth. Pachycephalosaurus had a thick layer of bone covering its skull, and is thought to have clashed in head-on attacks, like these bighorn rams. Musk oxen crash into each other to gain dominance within the herd. Many other modern-day animals use their heads and horns to fight to win mates and territory. Dinosaurs may have also competed with each other in a trial of strength. Like these Thompson's gazelles, Hypsilophodon probably grazed in herds for safety. While most ate with their heads down, a few individuals would watch for predators. The best form of defense was to sprint away from danger, and Hypsilophodon was one of the fastest dinosaurs of all. Like these reptiles, dinosaurs may have been cold-blooded creatures. These iguanas are basking in the sun to absorb heat. While it is cold, a reptile's movements are sluggish, and as it heats up, it becomes more active. If a reptile becomes overheated, it cools off by moving into the shade. Yet unlike reptiles, dinosaurs had straight legs, suggesting that they may have been warm-blooded animals. Modern-day mammals and birds with an upright stance are all warm-blooded, like this fast-moving rhino.
If Stegosaurus had been warm-blooded, it would have generated enough heat inside its body to maintain a constant body temperature. Stegosaurus would have needed to eat continually in order to digest enough food to make the energy to create its own body heat. It would have had a blood system with two circuits. The fully divided heart would have pumped a low-pressure circuit from the body of deoxygenated blood, this means blood without oxygen, to the lungs to pick up oxygen. The divided heart would have pumped a second high-pressure circuit of oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. When the weather was cool, Stegosaurus could have remained active as it would have generated enough heat inside its body to maintain a constant body temperature. If Stegosaurus had been cold-blooded, it would have needed the heat from the sun to keep its body warm while it moved about and browsed for vegetation. Stegosaurus used the plates along its back as a way of controlling its body temperature. To heat up rapidly, it would have turned its plates to face the sun to soak up the warm rays. The plates were covered by skin that had a rich supply of blood vessels. These blood vessels carried blood warmed by the sun back into the body. If its body became overheated, Stegosaurus would have turned its plates away from the sun's rays to cool down. As warm blood flowed through the plates, it cooled down before being passed back into the body. Stegosaurus would have had a blood system like modern reptiles. The heart pumped deoxygenated blood, this means blood without oxygen, from the body to the lungs to pick up oxygen. Once the blood had been pumped through the lungs, it became oxygenated blood and was pumped back to the heart. Cold-blooded animals, like reptiles, have a semi-divided heart. This means that it had a valve between two of its 4 chambers. This valve allowed oxygenated blood to mix with deoxygenated blood. The mixed blood was pumped to the rest of the body. At night, and at times when the sun did not shine, Stegosaurus would have been less active, as there was no heat from the sun to warm its body.
Like elephants, large sauropods had pillar-like supporting legs. Their straight legs and erect stance allowed them to walk and run easily. The rhinoceros gives us an idea of how dinosaurs, such as Triceratops, moved. Triceratops walked on 4 legs and could reach high speeds when running.
Quadrupedal dinosaurs like this Triceratops moved on 4 legs which supported the bulky body. Triceratops may have been capable of reaching speeds of up to 25 kilometers per hour. Dinosaurs were the only reptiles, either past or present, to have achieved an erect stance. By looking at the posture of other reptiles, we can see why this was such an advantage. The early ancestors of dinosaurs had a sprawling stance, just like modern-day lizards. Their limbs projected straight out from the body horizontally, so that the knees and elbows were bent at right angles. It required a lot of energy to move one leg at a time, as the body was thrown from side to side with each step taken. An added disadvantage was that when the body moved from side to side, it prevented the reptile from breathing. In time, some reptiles evolved straighter legs and a semi-sprawling stance. These later ancestors of dinosaurs had a posture similar to that of the modern-day crocodile. Their thighs and upper arms projected downwards and outwards, so that their knees and elbows were slightly bent. This was an improvement on the earlier reptiles, but no animal with this stance could move freely or grow to any great size. Eventually, dinosaurs with an erect stance evolved. With their body clear of the ground and weights supported by their legs, they were able to move faster and further and grow bigger and stronger than any other reptiles. The key to the dinosaurs' success was their ability to run and breathe at the same time. They could do this because they had a body that moved in a straight line. Scientists call this locomotor stamina, and no other reptiles have ever achieved it. Bipedal dinosaurs like this Tyrannosaurus moved on 2 legs. While walking, Tyrannosaurus placed one foot in front of the other in a movement similar to a human's. It used its powerful legs to reach speeds of up to 25 kilometers per hour, although it was too big and bulky to maintain this over any great distance.
A scared Struthiomimus might have behaved very much like this frightened ostrich. With its long shin bone and elongated upper foot, the so-called ostrich-mimic dinosaur would have been well equipped to sprint across open countryside, just as this ostrich races across the African desert. Struthiomimus possessed extra physical features, such as a long stiffened tail, but many scientists believe it could have matched the ostrich's top speed of 80 kilometers per hour. Jack Horner is a world expert on dinosaur eggs and nests. He noticed that some dinosaurs laid their eggs in a spiral. He also saw that each egg was tapered at one end. This one has been squashed on top and shows where the protective eggshell has broken. Inside the eggs, Horner found the tiny, fragile bones of fossilized dinosaur embryos, complete with teeth in the jaws. He removed this arm bone from one of the embryos to compare its size with that of an adult. Like these lions, flesh-eating dinosaurs probably hunted in packs. Lions prey on herds of plant-eating animals. They stay close to the herd, waiting for the right moment to strike. When a member of the herd becomes isolated, they go in for the kill. Predator dinosaurs may have behaved like these ferocious Komodo dragons. By working as a team, they can attack prey larger than themselves, providing enough food for all.
Iguanodon's hand looked remarkably human. It had a thumb spike which was probably used as a weapon. The sharp point could have penetrated an attacker's hide, inflicting vicious wounds. Edmontonia had bony and ridged plates that protected the neck, shoulders, back and tail. Some modern animals also have defensive body armour. The tortoise's short body is enclosed in a bony shell. When the tortoise is in danger, the retractable head and retractable legs are drawn into the shell. An armadillo's body is covered with a flexible horny shield. When threatened, the armadillo curls up into a ball so that only its armoured parts are exposed. The hedgehog erects its spines in response to a threat and rushes backwards or to the side to scare off its attacker.
These rare examples of fossilized skin give us some idea of what dinosaur skin may have looked like. Many wrinkles are still visible, and these suggest that a dinosaur's hide may have been thick, similar to the tough skin of an elephant. Dinosaur skin may have been typically reptilian, like the scaled and protective skin of a crocodile. No one knows whether dinosaurs had camouflage skin or whether they were brightly coloured and patterned, like this lizard.
Corythosaurus had a large eye on each side of its head. This meant it could see in two directions at once and watch for danger over a wide area. A passageway from the large external ear opening to the eardrum enabled Corythosaurus to listen for predators and for dinosaur calls. Corythosaurus used its sense of smell to detect approaching enemies by drawing air in through its nostrils. The eye sockets protected the eyes, and the eardrums were protected by being located deep inside the skull. A thin, hollow, bony crest, which contained an air passage, was made up from bones that extended from the nostrils to the back of the skull. The brain was small but well developed, and was protected within a solid brain case formed by the bones of the skull. The sense organs of the head, the eyes, ears and nose, sent signals along nerves to certain parts of the brain where they were interpreted as sights, sounds and smells. Scientists believe that dinosaurs like Parasaurolophus used the bony hollow crest on top of the skull to make sounds. This bony crest contained a complex U-shaped structure of tubes in which the sounds were made. This structure looked like the arrangement of tubes in a trombone. To make sounds, Parasaurolophus pushed air out of its lungs along the windpipe. With the mouth shut, this air passed along the lower nasal passages and upper nasal passages and out of the nostrils. The nasal passages acted like resonators, making the air inside vibrate as well as the skull bones around them. This produced a reedy sound, similar to that of an oboe or clarinet.
In its moment of death, the Tyrannosaurus lay on its left side, with its neck stretched back in rigor mortis. The skeleton was found embedded in sandstone, suggesting that it died in a sandy stream bed. The flesh decomposed, and the stream washed some of the bones away. The left arm was carried several feet from the body, where rancher Kathy Wonkel found it 65 million years later. The skull detached from the neck, broke apart, and rolled against the pelvis. The right leg flipped over the body and came apart. The end of the tail and parts of the feet appear to have been washed away altogether.
Pangaea was the supercontinent that made up the whole world at the beginning of the Triassic period, 248 million years ago. It was made up of all lands joined together. The northern part was called Laurasia, and the southern part was called Gondwana. Between them was the Tethys Ocean. Much of the land lay far from oceans and was very dry. The supercontinent Pangaea moved slowly northwards as one huge piece of land. After the middle of the Triassic period, cracks started to appear in parts of eastern North America and west and central Europe and northwest Africa. Laurasia and Gondwana were the two main areas of land at the beginning of the Jurassic period, 208 million years ago. In eastern Gondwana, the outlines of India, Australia and Antarctica were visible. Western Gondwana comprised Africa and South America. Eastern Gondwana started to drift southwards, while the western part moved northwards. This pull of the two parts in opposite directions caused Gondwana to split. This movement of the land masses created mountains along the southwest margin of Gondwana. Further north, Africa and South America began to split from North America, and rifts started to appear between North America and Europe. At the beginning of the Cretaceous period, 144 million years ago, the outlines of Africa, India, Australia, parts of Asia, Antarctica, South America, North America, and Europe could be seen clearly. Southeast Asia moved north and merged with a large landmass that was Laurasia. Africa, India, and Australia broke away from Antarctica. South America and Africa also split apart. The Atlantic Ocean started to open as North America pulled away from Europe and South America and Africa moved further apart. India and Africa moved north towards southern Europe. Rifts began to appear in East Africa that would eventually open up a new ocean. 20 million years ago, India collided with Asia. The impact of the collision pushed up the mountain range known as the Himalayas. Gradually, the land masses moved into their present-day positions. "65 million years ago, a large asteroid struck the Earth. Many scientists believe that it was responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs. The impact would have vaporized rocks and thrown up dust and water droplets into the stratosphere. As a result, the planet would have been covered in clouds, causing cold, stormy weather. These harsh weather conditions would have killed many plants and any animals sensitive to temperature changes. At the end of the Cretaceous period, floods of lava were erupting through the Earth's crust in what is now central India. For thousands of years, this process sent enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and acids into the air. This could have poisoned the atmosphere and formed thick clouds that shut out light from the sun, killing many plants and causing the extinction of the dinosaurs. By the end of the Cretaceous period, the global climate was changing dramatically. Dinosaurs may have been very sensitive to changes in temperature and may not have been able to adapt as areas of shallow sea disappeared, causing the planet to cool and the seasons to become more extreme. At the end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago, a Triceratops skeleton sinks to the riverbed, where it is buried in river sediment. It is now 50 million years ago. Mammals dominate the Earth. Thick layers of river sediment have built up over the skeleton. The weight of these layers has compressed the sediment into rock, and minerals have seeped into the dinosaur's bones, preserving it as a fossil. Many millions of years have passed, and it is now 40,000 years ago. Rain and wind have begun to wear exposed rock surfaces down to the level of the deeply buried Triceratops skull. It is now 20,000 years ago, and mountain-building movements of the Earth's crust have forced the skull closer to the surface. Thousands of years have passed. It is the present day, and the 65-million-year-old Triceratops skull lies just below the surface. Wind and rain erode the landscape down to the level of the skull. It is ready to be discovered by fossil hunters.
The anatomy of theropods, such as Eyewitness and Coelophysis, reveals that they were formidable, fast-moving hunters. Theropods include all known flesh-eating dinosaurs. One of the smallest theropods was Compsognathus, measuring just 1.5 meters long. It had many bird-like features, which were typical of theropods, such as nest-shaped neck, long limbs, and clawed, elongated, three-toed feet. Baryonyx, in comparison, was huge, measuring over 10 meters in length. Its most distinctive feature was its lethal thumb claw. Like Baryonyx, Spinosaurus had long crocodile-like jaws. But unlike all other theropods, Spinosaurus had an extraordinary skin sail, which scientists think may have been able to absorb heat from the sun. In contrast to its powerful body, Tyrannosaurus had puny forelimbs. Of all the theropods, Tyrannosaurus was one of the last in the evolutionary line. The suborder Sauropodomorpha was made up of two smaller groups, prosauropods and sauropods. Plateosaurus was a prosauropod. Prosauropods were probably the ancestors of the sauropods. Plateosaurus had typical prosauropod features, such as a bulky body with a long tail and neck, and a small head. The sauropods were among the largest ever land animals, and Brachiosaurus was one of the largest and tallest dinosaurs ever, weighing 45 tons. At an incredible 27 meters long, Barosaurus was one of the longest dinosaurs yet discovered. Barosaurus was the classic sauropod shape. A sauropodomorph's main defense against predators was its huge size. However, Saltosaurus was comparatively small. It compensated for this with tough armor plating on its back and flanks. Saltosaurus was the last member of the sauropodomorph evolutionary line. Thyreophorans were a group of armored plant-eating quadrupeds. Scelidosaurus was one of the earliest thyreophorans. Its rows of ridged bony studs were an early version of the impressive bony plates found in Stegosaurus. At 9 meters long, Stegosaurus was the largest known plated dinosaur. Its small head had a toothless beak and contained small leaf-like cheek teeth, typical thyreophoran features. The barrel-shaped Edmontonia's body was also heavily armoured. It had an unusual sheep-like head with cheek pouches to store food. With its tail club, short, broad skull and complex nasal passages, Euoplocephalus was typical of the ankylosaurs. Euoplocephalus was the last member of the thyreophoran evolutionary line. Ornithopods, like Heterodontosaurus, were a diverse group of plant-eating dinosaurs, with a horny beak, leaf-shaped cheek teeth, and a backward-angled pubic bone. Iguanodon was a large ornithopod with hoof-like claws and a deadly thumb spike. It could have reared up on its hind limbs and stabbed an attacker with its spiked thumb. The hadrosaurs were a group of dinosaurs that evolved from ancestors like Iguanodon. Maiasaura was a typical example of one of these duck-billed dinosaurs. It had a wide beak and multiple rows of grinding cheek teeth. But it is Corythosaurus, with its high, rounded crest, that is the most well-known duck-billed dinosaur. Hadrosaurs were the commonest large plant-eating dinosaurs of late Cretaceous North America. With its pointed cheekbones, cheek teeth for chewing vegetation, and skull ridge, Psittacosaurus was a typical marginocephalian. The tiny ridge on its skull was an early version of the huge neck frills seen in later species, such as Triceratops. Like Psittacosaurus, Protoceratops also had a distinctive parrot-like beak. Its well-developed neck frill was probably used for display. Triceratops' massive skull was more than one-third the length of its entire body. Its 3 horns may have been used in trials of strength between rival males. Pachycephalosaurus had a thickened dome of bone on top of its skull which cushioned the impact of head-on clashes. The shelf on the back of its skull is the equivalent of Triceratops' neck frill and shows how members of the marginocephalian evolutionary line shared key anatomical features.
The large, curved teeth and interdental plates on this fossilized jaw fragment would have been ideal for tearing through flesh and bone. This diet wore the teeth away quickly, so they were constantly being replaced. The new teeth can be seen pushing out the older, worn ones. The massive bones of Diplodocus's legs were designed to carry its enormous weight. The short toes were widely splayed, like those of a modern-day elephant. The first 3 bore blade-like claws. Diplodocus walked on its toes, but the high ankle was probably supported by a fibrous pad that helped to distribute the dinosaur's weight evenly. Baryonyx had a sharply curved thumb claw on each hand. These thumb claws were more than 30 centimetres long and would have made good weapons for attack and defence. If, as scientists think, Baryonyx ate fish, then it might also have used the sharp point of its thumb claws to spear its prey and hook it out of the water. Deinonychus had a scythe-like claw on the second toe of each foot. When attacking, Deinonychus swung the claw down and forward in a slashing arc, delivering stabbing blows. Edmontonia had small, narrow cheek teeth with elongated roots. The crowns were leaf-shaped and flat. Its diet of leaves and plants meant the flat teeth did not have to be powerful or interlock with each other. Enamel covered both sides of the tooth to protect against wear. Gallimimus had a very long, flexible neck, which enabled it to snatch insects and small animals with its beak. Its large eyes were on either side of its narrow head. This probably hindered its ability to judge distances, but by swinging its head around, it would have had extremely good all-round vision. The bony dome of this male Pachycephalosaurus skull protected a tiny brain. Over time, the bone continued to grow, sometimes reaching a thickness of 25 centimeters. The bony spikes and nodules on this oddly shaped skull, together with the structure of the neck, have led scientists to believe that males probably used their heads as battering rams to establish dominance within a herd.